buckets I talked about and the investment within those buckets.
Yeah. You'll be pleased to hear that I'm joined by roughly 200 junkies here in Oslo who also think it's difficult to not do much. Now, tomorrow we're releasing a podcast with Stephen Schwartzman from Blackstone, and he has one of his 25 rules not to lose money.
25 rules? It's way too many. How many rules do I have? Not to lose money, to buy things that are going up and sell things that are going down, and live in the present.
Not that lame, but let's listen to you.
It's just mathematics. If you go down 50, you got to go back 100 to get it back to even. And I've always thought the way to build a long-term track record is when you really see the ball swing really big. And when you don't see the ball, don't swing. And if you can build a record and when your terrible years, you're up 0 to 5, and then throw a couple 50s and 60s in, the numbers look pretty good over time. If you make a bunch of 30s and then you lose 55 or 60%, you got a long way back, and it's just the way the numbers work. Also, I'm a sore loser. I don't like to lose. So that kind of helps out too.
Just remind us of your compounding.
When I had clients, which is the only audited record, it was just a little bit over 30% net a year for 30 years.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But again, the top year was 99%. I had a lot of 5 and 7s in there. I didn't like 20, 30% every year. It was a matter of never losing and then throwing some big numbers in there, maybe 10 times.
A lot of people malign my record. It's certainly not a scratch on Stan's, but that's what I did. The majority, I had 15 years, and the majority of time, I'm going to bring up the returns. Boom, boom, you can see. And the majority of time, I was really boring. I want to say a variance of 5 percentage points, around 0, up 5, down 5. And then there were some outliers. 2003, 50%. 2008, notably, 31, 32%. I think where I failed, however, is I didn't populate so I had half of Stan's duration or maturity or tenure. I had 15 years, he had 30, and I only got 2 notable big hitting the ball out of the park. He got 10 or so over 30 years. Anyway, let's continue.
Tell us, when you invest, how important is the analysis and how much is now gut feel or pattern recognition? Me first. No, I'm kidding. Okay, Stan. But he's going to tell you that it's pattern recognition. He probably won't, but if we go back to Jesse Livermore, it is that gut. There is nothing better to understand a risk position than actually owning it, owning the long, owning the short. Now, you don't initiate with a full risk size. You initiate with a curious risk size, but there's nothing like being on risk to actually make you very desirous to know more. Let's see what Stan says.
Yeah, I don't know who, but I heard a saying, with analysis comes paralysis. Or Soros used to say, invest and then investigate, which I was already doing before I met him. But it's more important now even than it was then. We're in such a fast-moving world with all the new communications that if I get an idea and I think it's attractive, and for whatever reason that security price will be higher in a year or two, I generally go ahead and buy it and then tell the analysts to look into it. And if it turns out I was wrong after they analyze it, I get out. I don't like to wait around. A lot of my best ideas, I'm not that smart, so if I see it, someone else might see it, and by the time we get done analyzing, I will miss 30 or 40% of the move, and then I'm paralyzed because it just went up 30 or 40%, and I don't have the guts to buy it even if I think it's going higher. We're more in the camp of, if we got a strong feeling, we'll cut the analysis short, and then by all means do our analysis thoroughly and then just unload it if it turned out my thesis was wrong.
Do you depend more on this type of pattern recognition than you did in your early days?
No, I started in the 70s, and my mentor turned out to be a chartist, and I still use that.
And I started in the 90s and struggled because my mentor at the time, Bailey Gifford, was analytical. And despite that, I used to have pulsating kind of demons and voices in my head saying things are going to change. Please, the trade's coming, step off the track. And people just said, he's a troublemaker. Why is he a troublemaker? Because I hadn't learned to actually monetize notions of change. And then I did, like Stan. I found Chris Benodi, or he found me, and he was very much using charts. And Stan, it changed my life.
To find things others may not be looking at, because we use rate of change stuff that tends to lead.
Exactly. A good analytical idea requires the legitimacy of a trend. Good portfolio management is funding and storing a warehouse of great analytical ideas and having a warehouse manager like Stan who's capable of reaching out and retaining the knowledge of the great analytical idea and plugging it in when it becomes legitimate.
Now, I believe that one of the hallmarks of a great investor is to be stubborn, but at the same time agile and being able to change your mind. And you have that incredible combination. Now, how do you question your own beliefs? Lastly, Stan, if you were to leave us with some good advice here, how are we going to make the most money for the next 2 years?
Stan, forgive me. Let me take this one. You're going to make the most money by losing the least amount of money. Again, that's why it's so hard. It's so necessary sometimes to step outside the casino.
Oh boy. I said something that the press ran with, I don't know, 8 months ago, maybe it was a year ago, that I wouldn't be surprised if the stock market was not higher in 10 years.
I 100% agree with that. The system which will facilitate that is the monetary creation, the Ponzi scheme of sovereign savings from very large mercantilist nations. China is the size of Europe. Let's look at this chart. This chart is the trade surplus of China's trade surplus as a percentage of GDP. It peaked at almost 20% prior to the 2008 economic meltdown, the great financial crisis, and became as low as about 14%. And you can see it's now rising. If you look at China's first quarter data, I think exports were up 8 to 10%, imports were like flat. And this thing is set to surge. Why? Because it is an economic priority of the bureaucrats in China. Why is an economic priority? Because of the bubble, the busted property landscape, which was perhaps a third of the previous economic model. And secondly, their consumption is only 40% by design of GDP because they don't trust consumer booms. Private sector investment is flat because of all of these reasons, because the world is uncertain. And so the only legs, remember, GDP growth is an input. They start with what GDP growth will be, and then they figure out the factors which have to be deployed to generate the 5% economic growth. And so you're left with gross fixed capital formation. What does that mean? It means not the private sector, not profit-motivated economic agents, but agents of the government spending lots of money. And so first quarter, we saw a lot. We saw a record in terms of build out of more fast bullet trains in a country which has more fast bullet trains in terms of per capita density than any other country, which is bonkers when you consider what is still the modest per capita GDP of China. So the real thrust in order to meet these ambitious 5% economic growth targets will be export-driven growth.